Good evening, members. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wine Society's Bottle Battle online event here tonight. My name is Gil Riggins. I'm one of the events managers and the tastings team at the Wine Society, and I'm thrilled to be joined, and I'll just ask Freddie to unmute and put a camera on. Excellent. To be joined by three of our buying colleagues. We've got Freddy Bulmer, Victoria Mason MW, and we've got Matthew Horsley as well. How are you all?
We're good, thanks. We're not on mute, Matthew.
You're not on mute. Great start.
We're very well, thank you.
Well, thank you all very much for joining us this evening, and a special thanks actually for stepping up to the plate, as it were, and for your bravery to pit your respective nations against each other in our battle tonight. Now, as members, as you can see, I'm not in the same room as our buyers, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge for me to sort of mediate and keep the peace in this battle. But I will.
If we're going to be really naughty, we'll just mute you, Gil. And then,
well, see, that's why you're not co-host, you see. So you can't do this. But very much the idea tonight is a friendly, light-hearted battle amongst the three of you. Emphasis very much on those two, please. But members, the way the evening will work is we've asked each of our three buyers to select two wines, one white and one red from their respective nations, which they will in turn, in order of how I introduce there. So Freddie first, then Victoria, and then Matthew will start by introducing their nation, the country or the region that they've decided to choose, followed by their first producer and their first wine, their white wine. We'll go down the line of the three buyers, then we will, whilst we taste the wines, of course, and then we'll come back around and do the same again for the red wines. In terms of at the end of the evening, for those of you who have bought the tasting pack or perhaps have bought one or two of the bottles of wines that we're showing this evening, it is down to you members to decide on the night which are the stars of the show. So there'll be a little poll at the end asking you just two simple questions. What's your favorite white wine and what's your favorite red? No arguments, please, the three of you, depending entirely on how this goes.
Behavior.
I can't vote either, so I'm exempt from this. I love all six of these wines equally. I'll just put that there right away. But Freddie, before I pass the stage, as it were, and the microphone to yourself, a little bit of housekeeping, members, as is customary. Three bits of housekeeping, in fact. If you're having any difficulties, technical issues, or any connectivity problems, of course, I hope you're not. But if any of those arise, please do get in touch with me. You can do that one of three ways. You can email me, tastings@thewinesociety.com, or here on Zoom, you can just scroll to the bottom of your screen and you'll see a reactions tab. Click on that and then hit raise hand. That'll notify me and I'll get in touch with you. Otherwise, you can just drop me a direct message in the chat feature on Zoom and I'll see what I can do to help. Speaking of the chat feature, we would love to hear from you throughout the course of this session. As always, let us know where you're dialing in from. If you have the tasting pack, perhaps you've bought one or two of the bottles or pulled a wine yourself from your fridge or your wine rack. We'd love to know what's in your glass. Perhaps you've visited some of these 6 estates. We'd love to hear your stories there as well. And if you have any questions for our buyers, as challenging as they can be, please, on these wines or indeed anything else, please do put that into the Q&A feature. You can put them in the chat, but I might not necessarily see those. So if you put them into the Q&A, they'll stay front and center until we're able to answer them. You're not waving at me. I can see members. You're already telling us where you are.
People saying hello, which is very nice.
Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
Don't worry. We can't hear you. It's fine, Andrew.
Well, yeah, no, we can hear you, Gil, but not.
You can hear me, but yes. Hopefully, you can all hear all of us. But without further ado, then, Freddie, I've got a few slides to show. So, buyers, just prompt me if you want the next slide up, and I'll do my best to accommodate. But over to you.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, thank you all for joining us this evening. We are the three of us at my home house. It's a good start. And so, of course, if Australia doesn't win this, it is going to be a very, very awkward evening for my guests. So
we might not get dinner.
Yes, exactly. Do them a favour and vote Australia at the end. It's a pleasure to be joined by you all. We have each, as Gil mentioned, selected 2 wines, and it's just such the case that one of them from each of us is a single vineyard wine, and one is a blend of various vineyards. So it'll be interesting to see whether the single vineyards come out on top, or who knows, we shall find out. I'm fighting for Australia this evening, which, well, frankly, is an absolute joy, because it's such a fascinating wine country, and at a really interesting time at the moment too. Gil, would you mind putting the map up, please, to kick us off? That would be marvelous. So I've been working with Australia since 2019. It's absolutely flown by. And it's been only in the last 12 months or so where I think Australia has really come into its own, and we're starting to see the impact of what so many fantastic, smaller, fastidious, quality-focused producers are doing there. And thankfully, drinkers in the UK are taking note, which is fantastic. As you can see by the map, so I'm sure many people who are with us this evening have visited Australia before, and will know just how huge this country is. From Margaret River, the most furtherly western wine region, which is where our first wine comes from. Thank you, Gil. That's great. To Hunter Valley over the other side of the country, we're talking, a couple of thousand miles. I mean, it's vast. And one of the issues that Australia has faced has been that consumers, wine drinkers, have not really, I think, appreciated the diversity of climates and styles and so on across this country. And yes, there's producers who I think are now really, really proud of where they come from, really proud of the heritage of their particular region. And we're in this point now where there are producers who are, unashamedly Margaret River, but at the same time wanting to kind of push things forward quality-wise. And the value is great. So yeah, it's an exciting time. So there are 2 points on this map worth looking at for the 2 Aussie wines this evening. So Margaret River over in the west, which, Gil, if you wouldn't mind getting your cursor around, just pointing at the tiny little, that tiny little bit that sticks out on the left there. It's a sort of peninsula, really. It's influenced heavily by the ocean on 3 sides. It's a really unique climate, but it's perfect for Cabernet and Chardonnay in particular. However, the white wine that we're kicking off with is neither of those. And then later on, we'll be looking at South Australia. So Gil, if you could just point towards Adelaide there, we're going to be in that neck of the woods later on. So, we're a long way apart with these 2 wines, but they're both, I think, fantastic quality. Gil, if you could please skip on to the next slide. So in Margaret River, there are now a number of demarked sub-regions, if you like. Willowbrook is considered by, funnily enough, the people in Willowbrook to be the kind of the Grand Cru site. There's some fantastic wineries there. Some of the classic names are in Willowbrook. But the wine that we've got this evening, which is LS Merchants, it's a Chenin Blanc. We'll talk more about the wine specifically and LS Merchants in just a second. But they are in the Treaton sub-region. So where you see Coaramuk there, that's it. Thank you, Gil. So they're in the only region which is actually landlocked in Margaret River. So everywhere else is kind of, well, they're all coastal influenced, let's face it, but everywhere else is more significantly coastal influenced. They're a little bit more inland here. And this is a producer who, well, it's a small producer. Frankly, if you've not been to Margaret River or to Australia, you perhaps never heard of them. I mean, they're not particularly well, they're not well known at all, really, outside of Australia, but they have a fantastic local following. And their winery and cellar door is in the Treaton area. And they're working with estate-grown fruit there, and they buy some parcels from other growers around Margaret River as well. So, Gil, would you mind flicking forwards, please? So Margaret River is pretty beautiful. I put this in just because I wanted to give you all a sense of, well, really what life is like in Margaret River. It's an absolute, I mean, it's a stunning part of the world. It is paradise. And a lot of the talented winemakers who are based there, and Dylan from LS Merchants is a great example of this, moved there first and foremost for the surfing, for the ocean life. And so the surfing and the ocean life has brought some really, really talented winemakers to the region, really for the lifestyle. But thankfully, the climate there is absolutely perfect for grape growing. And that ocean, I guess, therefore influenced the wine industry in more than one way, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's a stunning place to be. So let's talk about the wine. So Gil, if you wouldn't mind flicking on again. So as I said, I held this up earlier. Have you still got some in your glass? Is that what this is?
I do.
You probably should have a little top up.
I've been holding off.
So this is, I'll top you up as well. So LS Merchants is the, yeah, exactly. Yeah, get you happy on my wine. So LS Merchants is the name of the winery. And for something a little bit different, we're looking at a Chenin Blanc. It's Chardonnay, which is the most famous white grape variety in the region. And, you know, understandably so, those of you who've tried the Chardonnays from there will, I'm sure, have experienced just how good they can be. But Chenin is experiencing a bit of a revival here. So this is a grape variety that came over to Western Australia about 150 years ago. So it's not a new addition by any means, but it actually came over from South Africa, which is quite interesting. And it made up quite a significant proportion of a lot of the sort of more inexpensive, let's say, Western Australian white blends. So those of you who are familiar with Horton's White Burgundy from back in the day, that was a large percentage Chenin Blanc. However, it sort of fell out of favor after a while, and a lot of the Chenin vineyards in Western Australia got ripped up, apart from only the very best sites. And up in Swan Valley, north of Perth, you'll find some great parcels of Chenin, but in Margaret River, the Treaton subregion lends itself really, really well to this grape variety. And so LS Merchants have seen the potential here, and they're really looking to kind of give this grape a bit of a revival, because can be absolutely fantastic and is a really just interesting point of difference. If you've got the wine with you, do feel free to get stuck in and have a taste while I chat about it. So LS Merchants, so this is a winery that I discovered only a couple of years ago. One of the great things about the Aussies and working with them is that they're so willing to recommend and support other Australian producers. And there's actually a link between the two wines that I'm showing tonight, which is that Sam from Whistler, who we're going to be talking about later, was the person that recommended LS Merchants to me. I said to him a couple of years ago when I was heading out to Australia, I'm going to be in Margaret River. Is there anyone that you know that you've come across that's, you know, perhaps doesn't export, but you're really excited about? And he said, you've got to go and check out LS Merchants. They're tiny, but the wines that I've tasted are fantastic. And you know, they're great quality, but they only really sell within Australia. They don't export at all. So I said, okay. So I dropped these guys a note and said, look, I'm going to be in the area, and would it be all right if I popped in? And Dylan, the owner of the business, sent me a message back saying, yeah, no worries. We actually don't really get that many sort of trade visitors from abroad. So we'll show you through the wines. And I turned up there and I was really, really impressed with the whole setup. Gil, are you able to flick on to the next slide? We seem to have lost the slides from our screen. Don't know if you can. There we go. That's the one. So this is Dylan on the right, his wife Taryn, and the dog Flash.
Flash. Well done. I was going to say, Flash. You can't forget the dog.
There we go. The Flash is the head winemaker, so he's very, very important. And yeah, it's a lovely, lovely family first winery, which was really what came across when I sat down with Dylan. I could tell as soon as I sat down with him, he was just really passionate about what he does. And I touched on it earlier, but he's actually a Kiwi. He moved over from New Zealand. He'd spent time making wine all around, well, various countries around the world. Spent a lot of time in Italy, funnily enough, in the States, in New Zealand and Australia before settling over in Western Australia. And he said it was the ocean that sort of drew him there and his love of surfing. And what's really cool is these guys have got an amazing local following. You know, you ask anyone in Margaret River, oh, who should we go and visit? You know, which cellar door should we go and hang out in? And they'll say, oh, LS Merchants. It's such a great buzz, such a great vibe, and they make all sorts of really fun and fascinating wines. So I said to Dylan when I sat down with him, look, I really like the wines, but you don't export anywhere, do you? He said, no, we don't even have an export license. I said, well, why is that? He said, well, to be honest, you know, we've had lots of emails from people all around the world saying, can we import your wines into X country? And he said, but I don't want to work with anyone who doesn't really get the wine and doesn't really get what we're all about. And he said, but you've taken the time to come and visit us, and you know, I can look you in the white of the eye and know that you're going to understand what we're all about. So yeah, you know, we'd love to work with you. So they actually got set up to export just so that they could send their wine to the Wine Society, which is pretty cool. And so we get to enjoy this. So as I mentioned, it's something a little bit different for the region. There's not that many people even now making Chenin in Margaret River, but it is on the up, which is fantastic. And what I love about this wine is the combination of freshness and texture. It's not too high acid, but it's bright, it's really lifted, it's really fresh. But at the same time, it's got kind of breadth to it. It's a wine that you can kind of feel as much as you can taste in a way.
I love how salty it is.
It is like salty,
savory, salty edge, which is really, makes you come back for another sip.
Absolutely, and that was something that, yeah, exactly, it's going down quite well. That was something that really
your plan is working.
Yes, this is something that drew me towards the wine in the first place. I thought, it's a really accomplished wine. I mean, it's very much, it's Chenin. I mean, it's unashamedly Chenin, but it also couldn't be from anywhere else, which I think is a really nice sign. It's not trying to imitate South Africa or the Loire.
But it's kind of got flashes of both, which I quite like.
Yeah.
On the nose, it's quite Loire-like. On the palate, it's quite
And it's funny you say that, because so this was a winner in this year's Wine Champions at the Wine Society. And these wines are all, of course, tasted blind. And this was in amongst a lot of Loire Chenins. And I remember distinctly our colleague, or ex-colleague now, he's retired, Sebastian Payne, who came back in to lend some experience for the tasting, saying, well, that's serious Loire Chenin. And then we unveiled it, and of course it wasn't at all. And so I think, testament to these guys, they're a great example of one of those wineries that's just doing they're just doing them, and they're doing it because they're passionate and they love finding amazing little parcels of grapes here and there, and it's really exciting. And Gil, would you mind just flicking onto the final slide for these guys?
Well, I was about to say that I was going to come back on camera to say we should definitely be showing this image, one of the finest tasting rooms, isn't it?
So this is their tasting room, and this is where I had the tasting on the table just on the left-hand side there with Dylan, where we sat down. And bought everything that they possibly sell us. We did a big tasting, and it was really interesting, and it was one of those moments as a buyer where you just feel really excited and really inspired, and it was quite refreshing.
And also to find a producer that's not in the UK.
Totally. Absolutely. And crucially, a producer that's not in the UK, but a producer which has such a strong local following.
Yes.
And the folks in Margaret River love it. This place is absolutely pumping on a weekend. And interestingly, Dylan is big into his drum and bass. So you turn up at the cellar door and there's drum and bass music going in the background. You've got this view to look at all the wines that you could possibly want to taste. And one final thing, which I thought was fantastic, was not that long ago, I was speaking to one of the guys at LS Merchants, and he said, we get loads of Wine Society members coming to visit us now. He said it's like every other week we get some. I bought your wines from the Wine Society. So well done, you lot members. It's absolutely fantastic.
When were they established, Freddie?
These guys, in the last 10 years. So it's quite new. So Dylan was making wine around the world, various different countries, and then started the LS Merchants project before actually settling down in one spot. So it was a bit of a kind of buy a parcel of grapes from here and a parcel of grapes from there, and then settled on Margaret River and kind of kicked off then. So wine number one, which I think for me anyway does a great job of representing Australia's kind of forward-thinking approach, the innovation that's going on there, but also at the same time the most important thing, absolute deliciousness and accomplished winemaking too. Thank you very much.
Delicious.
Well, okay.
Almost feel I should applaud there. Sorry, Victoria. a very strong start, Freddie.
There you go. Right, what's wine number two?
Very strong start.
Could I also? I mean,
we need someone to kind of walk through like a boxing ring, holding up the next number for the next wine.
Yeah, like
a ring person. Yes. I'll pour it this way so that the people watching
so that we can see. Brilliant. Well, so thank you very much, Freddie. That was a great opener.
The pleasure was all mine, clearly.
So just a brief introduction to me, because I haven't met many members so far. So I joined the Wine Society in May, and I'm covering Sarah Knowles's maternity leave. So while she's off looking after her baby girl, I am looking after USA and Italy and Champagne. So I'm very much representing her producers here and her really fierce love and passion for the US. So unlike Freddy, I suppose, or by contrast to Freddy, I'm starting with what is I guess, a kind of modern classic. So Au Bon Climat. The mind behind this wine and this winery is the late but very great Jim Clendenin. So unfortunately, I never met him, but both Matthew and Freddie have met him, and Sarah has visited him many times. So I've got some great anecdotes to share. But many of you will know he really is a legend of the wine industry. And in the California context, he put Santa Barbara on the map. Talking of which, maybe we have a map.
Yes.
Good segue. That was
good. So Jim was christened Wild Boy by Jancis Robinson decades ago, and was really known for his, I guess, being the life and soul of the party, being hugely outspoken, being a free spirit, and being super determined and focused on his vision and his goal. So for those of you that know the wines, it won't surprise you to know that his inspiration came from Burgundy. So his first trip to Burgundy would have been there he is. It would have been as a young man in 77. And then he worked harvest there in 81. And this was actually, by all accounts, I haven't had any 81 Burgundies, but it was a really difficult harvest. The grapes were not ripening. It was raining a hell of a lot. So Jim was actually mostly waiting for the fruit to come in. And during that time, he was sort of cruising around the villages with Jean-Francois of Francois Frère, the very, very famous coopers, who have customers such as Domaine de la Romani Conti, Armand Rousseau, Henri Jaillet. So Jim was...
Who? And Rustenberg.
and seamlessly moving on to our third Rustenberg. So Jim was waiting for that 81 harvest to really get started, and was actually meeting some of the greats, and was being inspired by this old world Burgundian style of winemaking. And he came back to California, and at a time when the emphasis was all on Napa and on Sonoma, he went down to this cool climate. So as we saw in the map previously, Santa Barbara sits at the southern end of the Central Coast, which is a vast region.
I'll get my cursor out again. There we go.
Yes,
there
exactly.
We go.
Perfect. Thank you. And this is quite unique, because this stretch of the coastline is the only stretch on the west coast of North and South America where the mountains run. They run east to west rather than north to south. So what that means is Santa Barbara is fully exposed to the Pacific Ocean. So it is cool. It's got those morning fogs. It's got chilly nights, and the acidities that you can achieve there with the likes of Chardonnay and Pinot, and possibly Jim is more famous for his Pinot even than Chardonnay, can challenge the acids of a cool vintage Burgundy. So he set off inspired by this approach. He founded Au Bon Climat, which means a good place, or a well-exposed place, in 1982. And the Chardonnay that we're tasting today is actually, it's a fantastic introduction to the Au Bon Climat range. It is its 40th vintage. So quite a nice momentous moment to look at this. It's also the first vintage, the 2022 vintage, when Jim's son, so both Jim's son and daughter, Knox and Isabel, are heavily involved in the winery. But this is the first vintage that Knox was fully in the winemaking crew. I'm sure he'd been pretty involved in the years before that. But yeah, so and it was the first vintage when Jim wasn't around. So a kind of symbolic wine in lots of ways. To just kind of flip back to what that Burgundian influence meant to Jim, what he was aiming for all of his kind of loudness and brashness and what he calls his bloody big mouth. He was making wines which had restraint, which had finesse, and which was also built for the long haul. And he stayed true to that when California went through its crazy sort of everything needs to be maxed up. Everything needs to be to the nth degree of ripeness. We need so much oak. We need so much extraction. Jim stayed unwaveringly true to his style, so that when the response to that, so when the Rajpar, who is a mentee of Jim's, and when Jasmine Hirsch founded the In Pursuit of Balance movement now 13 years ago, the Obon Climate wines were in that first inaugural tasting in 2011, and really he's inspired a generation of winemakers after that, hundreds of winemakers. He was making elegant wines when it wasn't cool to make elegant wines. So as I said, it's kind of the introduction Chardonnay to his range. This is a blend of 5 vineyards, including the amazing Bien Nacido vineyard and also Los Alamos. So like with everything, it's whole cluster pressing, it's indigenous yeast fermentation, it's full mallow in barrel, but it's 8 months in neutral barrel. There may occasionally be the odd new barrel thrown into the mix if one of the top vineyards is declassified, but it's very much about this kind of pure expression of fruit. And to make a pitch on the value side of things, which is possibly a harder pitch for the USA, is Jim's pricing has barely changed in 2 decades. Sure, the price of new French oak has increased, but actually on a wine like this, which doesn't see new French oak, what he wants is for wine lovers to drink his wine and to have access to his wine. And that's, well, I think, it's pretty admirable, pretty cool. But yeah, let's taste the wine.
I love how this smells.
Yeah,
it's just it's a masterclass in oak use for me, because it's clearly there, but also it's not lacking balance by any means. I mean, it's more textural. For me, there's a sweet spice to it, but it's so nicely integrated. And I have to admit, I'm very guilty sometimes of dismissing wines when they're too obviously oaked, and especially when they start to impact the tannins. But this is just delicious because the oak has just become a part of the character of the wine. It's seamless. Yeah. It's absolutely seamless. Yeah. And every time I stick my nose in the glass, it's changing. Would you like a drop more?
No, I'm good.
Matthew's racing through. He's ready to speak.
I am. Wow, nice.
Well, before you do though, man, sorry, I wanted to should I bring this picture up for you?
Yeah. No, that's an amazing picture actually, and this is something that Sarah Knowles really said to me to mention. So, as I mentioned, I haven't met Jim, and I haven't visited one of his legendary lunches. But what he became famous for in hiring a big space for his winery, he became legendary for these incredible lunches. So everyone in the winemaking team, everyone in the wider business came, as well as he would invite local neighboring winemakers or trade if they were passing by. So Sarah's been to them, and he loved to cook. So he loved to cook delicious food, and people would bring wines that had inspired them, something interesting they tasted, something they wanted to explore. And he really, I think, in this way, and talking to other people that are rooted in the California wine industry, he fostered this kind of this wine and food culture, which I mean, didn't exist prior to him. So, this kind of conviviality. He was a man of larger than life, and believed in indulging. And I'm actually, you have a story to tell. Oh,
very
yes, no,
very
please do,
because I'm
I was
aware
about to say I'm
halfway
sad.
through our time. But no, back when I was in tastings about 8 years ago, I was doing a tasting in Birmingham. It was a dinner, and I think I was the only wine society person there. And I was halfway through a speech at the beginning, and one of the staff members came up to me and said, "Oh, there's a gentleman at the bar that wants to speak to you." And I kind of turned to her and said, "Well, tell him to fuck off, basically. I'm busy." And she goes, "No, he really wants to speak to us." I was like, "Okay, give me 5 minutes, and I'll go and speak to him." So I did, and Jim was sat at the bar. And I said, what the hell are you doing here? Shook his hand, because I'd never met him before, but I obviously recognised him. And he said, "Well, I saw the wine society was in town, and I wanted to come and say hello." And he went into the dining room. We weren't doing anything to do with California or anything to do with his wines. And he just stood at the front and said, "Probably no one here knows who I am, but I'm Jim Clendenin. I'm from Obon Climate, and I just wanted to say thank you all so much for what you do at the Wine Society, and thank you all for our members. And it was amazing. And I was there, and it was the nicest experience ever. It was so lovely. He was such a gentleman and such good fun. And I've always loved his wines, and I do believe very much that Santa Barbara is the real peak of California Chardonnay, and Au Bon Climat are very much at the top. So yeah, it's really nice to share it with some friends.
Amazing. I'm going to pass on to you.
Cool.
Speaking of sharing glass with some friends.
Speaking of sharing glass with friends. Cool. So I suppose I've kind of, in a way, it's a bit like Freddy's story in that whereas he's got a Chenin in a land of Chardonnay, I've got a Chardonnay in a land of Chenin.
Brilliant.
And so obviously South Africa is heavily planted in terms of white varietals towards Chenin Blanc. And there is still a decent amount of Chardonnay, but I do think it gets slightly overshadowed, sometimes rightly. But I think this is a case where with Rustenburg and the Five Soldiers, this Chardonnay stands, very strongly against some of the world's best Chardonnays. And where we've got a kind of modern classic, I suppose, Au Bon Climat, and a new classic, a new great, I suppose, with their LS. Rustenburg dates back to the 1600s, and it was actually originally a grape farm as well. So there is wine history going back all those years as well, which is fairly incredible, especially for South Africa. And there's actually a history of wine being bottled on the estate for over 100 years now, which is absolutely incredible. The estate, as it is today, was purchased by the Barlow family in 1941, and it's now looked after by Murray Barlow, who took over from 2012, who's the grandson of those that purchased it in 1941. And as you can probably tell from my beautifully tanned complexion, I've just come back from 3 weeks in South Africa.
I think it's just the pink.
Yeah, I think it's just and I actually spent some time with Murray at Rustenburg, and so we do have some pictures in a second, which I'll show of the Five Soldiers vineyard. But they are very much one of South Africa's most historic states. I think we've got a map as well, just to give a bit of context as to where they are. And so they are very much right at the foot of the Simmonsberg mountain, which is in Stellenbosch. So it's that kind of light blue just to the east of Cape Town there. The Simmonsberg kind of runs southeast to northwest in terms of its angle. It's basically a massive granitic outcrop, which always reminds me slightly of like the back of a dinosaur, those kind of scales that you get on the back of the dome. Yes, like a Stegosaurus's back, which is absolutely fantastic. It just sticks out from the ground in pretty amazing fashion. And so it's basically decomposed granite. Their vineyards, as I mentioned, really are very much at the foot of the mountain. Their Peter Barlow Bordeaux blend pretty much rides halfway up the mountain. It's a major risk whenever there are fires there. It's pretty much the first vineyard that gets hit. This is slightly further away from the Simmonsberg, and it's a vineyard. It's a single vineyard wine. We mentioned we've got some single vineyards wines today. It's called Five Soldiers because there are 5 pretty amazing pine trees that we can see in a second, hopefully. The pine or beech?
That's the back of the dinosaur, I guess.
There we go.
There we go. That basically there's 5 on this hill which overlook the vineyard just to the left-hand side. And I think on the next picture you can see you're facing basically due south there. So you've got False Bay just towards the bottom. You can see Table Mountain from the top of there, which is absolutely fantastic, just really kind of behind the trees on the right-hand side. The vineyard itself is just on the left. It's a fairly old block of Chardonnay. It's not certified old vine, but it makes some wonderful zesty Chardonnay because the Simmonsberg is basically the most northerly area of the Stellenbosch area. Once you go past that, you're into Paarl, kind of the northeast, and you're in the Swartland to the northwest, and so it starts to get extremely warm. But the great thing about this site is that it's about 450 meters elevation. Apparently, I had no idea it was that high, but it's extremely high, and you get wonderful cooling influences, not only from False Bay, but also from the altitude. And I think sometimes you might think that South African Chardonnay, especially from warmer Simmonsberg, can be quite rich and full, but this has got a wonderful kind of citrus core, and part of that I think is from the maturation. So whilst it does have 70% new French wood, they are through Francois Frere. Partially, I think they use quite a few different coopers, but I think they are. But they're 300 litre hogsheads, so it's slightly larger than your traditional Burgundian barrel. And rather than toasting with fire, they toast entirely with hot water or steam. And so you get very little in terms of nutmeggy toast to them. Instead, it's a much cleaner oak profile. And so you get this really kind of light spice to the new oak. It's there. I think there is new oak there. And actually, having opened it right at the start, because it's under screw cap, you get a really nice reductive character on the nose. But actually, it's opened up. And about half an hour before we went live, I tasted the wine again. I thought, oh God, this is looking really oaky now. And it's young, but I think it is opening up. It's showing a bit more of the oak now. So perhaps if you've got it in your tasting packets, it might be showing that oak quite nicely. But it is a wine that's built for the long haul. I think this is one that is going to age really nicely for about 10, 12, maybe even 15 years, especially under Stelvin. But that
means screw cap.
Screw cap, yeah. But I just think it's a really crisp, refreshing, elegant style of Chardonnay that does kind of border on Burgundy. I think South Africa, despite having just had a delicious Chenin, which does remind me of Loire, I think South Africa's got that amazing balance of being probably stylistically the closest to French wine in terms of New World countries. And so I'm a big believer that if you're a Francophile wanting to expand a little bit more, then South Africa can always be a good, happy first port of call. And I think this does have very Burgundian elements to it. And so
I think it's delicious. It's a real like hug in a glass kind of white wine as well, isn't it? It's so kind of it's got a lovely. I know you're saying it's not been fire toasted as such, those barrels, but that kind of delicate oakiness is so pure and so lovely.
But I also love that. I think the acidity is really energetic. There's
like a key lime pie kind of feel.
That's you said that citrusy core. Really, really shines through. And it's super young. It's 22, as you say. Like
very bright.
It's very nice. And so I'd be fascinated to see that in 10 years. I mean, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
It's got everything it needs.
It's 13.5, so it's not low in alcohol, but it's not outrageous. So I think it's a classy drop.
A classy drop indeed.
A classy drop. Right. There we go.
White's done.
Well, before we
sorry, Gil.
No, but I was going to say before we move on to the red wines, just there's been a few comments made in the chat and a question as well there. But before I get to those, just I'd like to this is the kind of classic dinner party kind of conversation that you three would have. It seems it's just this is just the conversation that we're typically
we're terrible bores
in the office at the desk.
They don't have dinner with us. There's a reason why it's just the three of us on our own in a flat.
Just the three.
But we have had a few mentions. I'll start with this in the chat here. This one's to you, I believe, Freddie. It's not a question as such, but more of a cruel to show us the tasting room at Ellis Merchants on such a horribly gloomy night in the UK.
Very cruel.
Quite right too. Yeah, sorry, it is cruel, but yes, it's. I thought it would bring a bit of sunshine to your living rooms.
Also, actually, one note here that who'd have thought that the Aussie white was the lowest in alcohol? I think on those three.
Yeah. So I think it's a good observation actually, and it's something which there are producers like Ellis Merchants and I think Whistler and a few others that we work with who are destroying these ideas that Aussie wines are always really big, overripe, super high alcohol. They're just getting their pick times right. They're picking earlier, picking a bit fresher, keeping the alcohols down a little bit, and making much more balanced wine. So that's very much a sign of what I would call modern Australia.
Yeah.
I hadn't looked at the alcohol. I just looked at it because I saw the comments. It's 12%, 12.1%, and it's incredible the intensity of fruit and the length and persistence. It just shows you don't need alcohol to achieve that level of intensity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we've got this. So here's a question about the ABC or the Aubin Climat for you, Victoria. How well does that particular wine age, or how well do those wines typically age? Obviously, vintage varies.
What's incredible about Jim is, again, inspired by Burgundy. He went about building an amazing library of back vintages. So when he has visitors, he can rock out 20-year-old California Chardonnay, which not many people can. This is his entry to the range, but I've tasted it at a decade old where it is still pulsing with energy. So, and as I said, like the pricing hasn't changed much in 20 years. It's a great introduction to the range, but that doesn't mean you can't put it in your cellar and open it. I mean, literally 2030. To be fair, I think it's I think it's tasting delicious now, and I'm going to be very happy to drink this after we finish. But you can definitely cellar it and see further complexity emerge in bottle.
Yeah.
And his single vineyard's like next level, like no doubt about how long they age for.
Yeah. Brilliant.
The anniversary? No, we didn't.
No, it's sold out. Sorry.
Right, on to the Reds.
Reds.
Well, a fantastic start there. 3 wines in.
Gil, can I just do a time check with you? What time do we finish?
7:15.
Okay,
Plenty of time.
Basically, Freddie needs to not talk for 20 minutes.
Well, I was thinking.
I didn't want to bring that up.
No, that gives me a good half hour. And then you guys 2.5 minutes each, and then close.
And they say I talk a lot.
Yeah. Right, Matthew, would you mind awfully passing the bottle, please?
Sorry.
So,
Do you want me to parade it?
oh, sorry. Thank you, Matthew. So, Gil, please can you bring up the slides? Thank you. So, the next wine that we've got, back to Australia here. This is a blend of Shiraz and Cabernet. We're in the Barossa. What's the? I'm actually interested by the alcohol percentage now, 14%. So, no, not silly. Right. So here's South Australia, or South Australia's wine-producing regions. The Barossa is about a 45-minute drive out of Adelaide. It's basically where the sort of. Gil, would you mind pointing? That's the one. Thank you very much. And why don't you flick on to the next picture, which gives you a bit of a sense of what the Barossa looks like. There we go. So it's a
horrible.
Oh, come on. Are we going to get really nasty with this with the Reds now? So this is it's just a gorgeous part of the world. The Barossa is famous though for, and I think unfairly nowadays, for producing massive, 16% alcohol, over extracted OTT reds that are a bit of a slap in the chops. But the winery that we're looking at this evening is making wines, like I said with that, as much as they're making wines that are unashamedly Barossan, but are very much modern, progressive Barossa, where balance and freshness is so key in what they're doing. Please, can you flick on to the next slide? So, Barossan is good, isn't it? Yeah, thank you. No, I wish. That would be good, wouldn't it? So, this is the bottle shop. So, this is a wine which we have offered as a first release in Bond. So, it's not currently available for sale, but we'll be offering the 23 vintage in January. So, keep an eye out for that. So, Whistler, actually, let's click on to the next picture and I'll talk to you about the producer. So, this is the Pfeiffer family. So, on the left, you've got Kelsey and then her husband, Sam. And then Sam's parents, Sally and Martin. Now, Sam is a 4th generation grape grower in South Australia. His dad, unsurprisingly, being 3rd generation. And the story of Whistler really starts with Martin Pfeiffer. So Martin, for many, many years, was one of the head viticulturalists for Penfolds. So Sam and his brother grew up riding quad bikes through some of the most significant vineyards in Australia, full stop, basically. And when Martin retired in the mid-90s, Penfolds allowed him, as one of only 3 people, to take cuttings from Grange vineyards to plant his own Shiraz. So he took cuttings of what is the Kalimna 3C clone of Shiraz, and that was what started Whistler. So he planted a Shiraz vineyard right by their house, which is not far from Tanunda in South Australia, beautiful part of the world. And they planted that Shiraz block in 1994. And it very much started as a little family winery. It wasn't really a serious kind of project, but he'd spent his life making or growing grapes, so thought it makes sense to plant his own vineyard. And then in 1997, added some Cabernet, albeit not from a Penfolds vineyard, but added some Cabernet to their estate vineyards. And long story short, ultimately, those are the 2 grape varieties that go into this wine. One of the best things that's happened to Whistler is Sam coming and taking over. He bought the family winery from his parents only in the last 2 or 3 years. So him and Kelsey are now very much at the helm, and his parents have stepped aside now. And he's done a great job of really recognizing the potential in the grapes that they grow on the estate there. He brought in a fantastic winemaker, Michael Corbett, who has his own label, Vanguardist, which is a bit of a cult hero label in Australia. because Sam isn't a winemaker first and foremost. To say great grower, but he's also spent time working in sort of sales and marketing. So he's been fantastic for kind of packaging up what they have on site there, and yeah, really shining the spotlight on it that it deserves. This is their top tier. So the estate level sits above wines that we also sell: Shiver, Shiraz. There's double back Grenache. They're also very good, a bit more approachable, a bit more sort of fruit forward. But what I love about this wine, and just to briefly say, the label is the outlines of the two blocks. So on the left, that's the outline of their Shiraz block, and on the right, their Cabernet block, sort of overlapping on the front. So they also do a single estate Shiraz and a single Cabernet as well. Anyway, what I love about this wine, we're in kind of full on sort of icon Barossa territory here, but thanks to Sam's kind of vision and Michael Corbett's execution, they've managed to produce a wine which is serious, has concentration, has presence. This is ageable, but it's also silky and it's not heavy and it's got definition and I love the freshness there. I mean, it's 14%. It's not a small wine, but
that's for Barossa. That's actually light.
It is. I know. It's quite funny. So they're not far. Their vineyards aren't far from Torbreck, and the Torbreck guys, who are one of the great names of traditional Barossa. See these guys starting to pick 2 or 3 weeks before Torbreck that are planning on picking, and they think that Whistler are bonkers. What are you doing? We're not picking for 2 weeks. This is crazy. But actually, I think you get a sense in the wine of what their vision is, and I think they execute it really, really well.
And I think, so my first introduction to Whistler wines is literally since joining the Wine Society.
Yeah.
And obviously meeting Sam up in Manchester in June when we had one of our amazing exhibitions.
Yeah.
And there was tequila involved.
There was a lot of tequila involved.
Yeah.
I think that's a fun thing about the Aussies. They work hard, they play very hard.
They very much do.
Yeah.
But what I was blown away by about all of his wines, and starting at the entry point all the way up to this icon, is that freshness, that detail, and I think probably say that kind of vitality. They are like, it feels like it's the new wave of Barossa.
Yeah,
and Freddie has introduced me to that personally.
Even just smelling it, just when we first poured it, I looked at Victoria and said, "This is like a blind tasting dream," because it smells like Barossa. But I taste it and I actually want to drink it.
Yeah, totally.
I must admit, 99%, 90% of Barossa I struggle to
it's actually sweet, doesn't it?
But there's so much life to it. It's a real kind of homage to the fruit that they've got, which is amazing, and it's not overdoing it, it's not over oaking it, it's just
we're not supposed to be being too kind to him.
No, be nice. It's lovely.
We love the wine,
guys. It's great. I'll go first, and I'm just going to slate your wine. So but no, that's I think you're absolutely right. It's and vitality is such a great word, and it's kind of what they're all about. And these guys want to prove that actually you can still make balanced, energetic, lifted wines without shying away from being Barossan, to use the same word. Gil, would you mind just putting up the last picture of the tasting room? Because sorry,
because Freddie's goal is just to make us wish we were in Australia.
Yeah, basically. But this is at least at night, so it could be here. So this is again, like LS Merchants, a winery that we work with directly at the Wine Society. And again, something which is so positive is the incredible. I wish it was me. It's not me. Is the incredible reputation that they have locally. Again, it's another winery with an absolutely pumping tasting room. They're always putting events on. They sell so much of their wines within Australia, which I think is such a good sign. And they're a really lovely partner for us at the Wine Society.
And only available at the Wine Society?
Yeah, there's technically a teeny tiny little merchant in deepest South Wales.
Okay.
So we bring a few cases over, but for anything sort of significant, then yes, it's sort of exclusive to us if you like. But great wines, great people, beautiful part of the world, and they're really kind of pushing the boundaries, and I really respect that. So cheers to those guys.
Cheers to Sam.
Cheers.
Cheers to Sam.
There we go.
He finishes again. He's always
absolutely
out of us.
I'm about to talk.
Right, on to the next one.
Well, before we do that, I just want to apologise again for Freddie showing another beautiful evening in Australia at a tasting room. a party on this.
While we were
Hey,
in Stephen
no,
A's-
come
Golden wine.
Come on, it's all about attitude. You know, consider yourselves very much there. Oh, Matthew's destroying my IKEA table.
And we've had an act. Okay.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Okay. Sorry, I'm spilling again. Thank you, Freddie. Lovely wine, by the way.
Thank you, Matthew.
So I've stuck with the classics, and it's another estate that was founded in the 1600s. This is Meerlust. This is their Rubicon 2021. And yeah, I think that it's hard to talk about the greatness of South African wine without mentioning Meerlust even slightly. And Rubicon is very much one of the icon wines of this amazing country. I'm trying to think about what to talk about first. I'll probably talk about the family first. So it's been held within the Myburgh family throughout its history. It's currently under the watch of Hannes Myburgh, who I think is the 8th generation, which is fairly incredible. He's an amazing chap. If you get a chance to visit Meerlust, the other benefit of Meerlust is that when you're driving from Cape Town to Stellenbosch, it's pretty much the first winery that you'll pass, and so it's always quite easy to stop in and say hello. Hannes is an amazing man. He's incredibly generous. He's extremely kind. He travels extensively, and he's got an army of about 11 dogs as well. I think. So whenever he walks into a room, you kind of have to spend about 5 minutes, because it's like the Von Trapp family. One after another, a dog will come in to say hello as well, which is really quite sweet. I'm going to try and win this test on dogs.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
well,
You've got tasting rooms, I've got dogs.
I will have to change the order.
I will state
Yes.
at this point, you've thrown me slightly here with a slight change of order. We
Oh,
were
have
gonna-
we?
Oh,
We didn't
sorry,
even-
I
we
thought we
didn't even
discussed
know.
that.
Sorry. I thought,
Were you
So,
expecting
yes.
Rich?
I was, but no, that's just fine. Yes,
Sorry, everybody,
apologies.
about Matthew, the South Africa buyer. Do make sure that that's a mark against South Africa,
They
please.
basically just wanted to push me to the end.
Yeah.
I think it's perfectly reasonable to try Zinfandel at the end. personally.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's fair enough.
Yes, so obviously it's Bordeaux blend. It's called Rubicon because basically the original producer who first started making Rubicon, I think it's the 35th vintage of Rubicon 2021. Basically, they were the original creators of a Bordeaux blend in South Africa, and so they saw it as their crossing the Rubicon moment, just like Caesar crossing the Rubicon in that epic moment in Roman history, arguably the most important moment in the history of Europe.
Wow.
How often did you
and-
think about the Roman Empire?
yeah. and even it says on the bottle top around the label here, it says the die is cast, which supposedly is what Julius Caesar or Julius Caesar, to give it his proper name, would have said before crossing the Rubicon, which is pretty cool. It's 2021, which is a fantastic vintage in the Western Cape. Quite a wet winter, which kind of refilled water levels, which was fantastic, and quite a cool start. But that really retained wonderful acidity in the wines, which I think will mean that they will age for absolute donkey's years, which is fantastic. It's a blend of 48% Cabernet Sauvignon, 46 Merlot, 5% Cabernet Franc, and 1% Petit Verdot. The other interesting thing is that this is the first vintage under the entire ownership of the current winemaker Vintruta, who took over from Chris Williams, who a lot of members will know not only because of Meerlust, but also because of the foundry, which he's been making for about 20 years now. And actually, when I was picking up my baggage from did I mention I've been in South Africa for 3 weeks?
3 weeks, guys. 3 weeks.
Picking up my baggage, he was on the same plane as me, so I had a nice chat with Chris whilst we were waiting for our baggage, which was fantastic. Anyway, I digress. These are all great varieties, are fermented and matured for about 8 months in their own separate French barrels, then blended and then aged for a further 10 months together. I'm not too sure about the quantity of new oak, but I think it's probably around 80% or so.
Wow.
But it's, as I said, it's an iconic wine. Really, this is slightly infanticide in that we're drinking it far too young. But I think we've had it open and decanted for probably about a couple of hours, and it's just started to show its stripes. It's got that lovely herbaceous Cabernet character to it, but as I mentioned, that fantastic brisk acidity from 21 and a real muscular character. And then, Meerlust has always been a wonderful wine, but if it's probably had any criticism from my part in that historically it's maybe been a little bit old school, and Vim has really kind of cleaned up the fruit and really made it about the fruit. A bit like Freddie mentioned with Sam, in that it's really a showcase of how pure the fruit can be. And I think that's really, and that structure, picking slightly earlier, it's giving that structure that is going to be a wine that's going to mature for the next 20 years rather than a wine that's going to be ready to drink within 5.
What's really nice about it, though, despite the approach that they've taken, it's not become in any way clinical. It's still got so much soul to it, which is lovely. Because so often you hear about somebody new coming into a winery, they've got the direction they want to go in, they want to clean things up, but they kind of take the heart and soul out of the wine. But this is just...
I agree. And I think we've got a picture of some of the, I mean, it's granted, this is back in June.
It's not the Barossa, is it?
It's not the Barossa.
No.
This is back in June, so I was there in June as well. And so this was back during, winter dormancy, basically. So it's not the most pretty picture of the vineyards. But again, you see Table Mountain in the background there. Just there. Yeah. So this vineyard site is, again, decomposed granite. This is far further south than the Simonsberg, and so this is much closer to the Helderberg in terms of area. And so it's close to the ocean. This is about 150 meters altitude, so you get a lot more ocean breeze. And one slightly well-known person in the wine trade in South Africa called Eben Sadi did describe this as the best Cabernet vineyard in South Africa.
Wow.
And so if Eben says that, then I believe
he is God, I believe.
Yeah, he is sort of South Africa.
Yeah, and I think if the next picture is hopefully a massive rock of granite, which
hey,
if that's probably, if I was to lie down on that, I wouldn't be able to fit on it. It's bigger than I am in terms of height.
Oh,
right.
I
You would fit on it.
Yeah, I would fit on it easily.
Several
Sorry.
times.
Yeah, it's huge. So that gives an idea of these granitic outcrops that this vineyard has, which really aids the stress and the concentration that you get with these wonderful wines. So
it's super, really nice.
It's amazing, and I really
it feels tightly. It's still, as you say, it's tightly coiled. It's got so many years ahead of it.
Also, what's really nice about it is, very much Bordeaux blend, but not trying to copy Bordeaux.
Yeah,
it's unique. It's South African.
It's authentic.
It's authentic. Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
I like it, Matthew. Well done.
Thanks, mate.
Well done, you.
Okay, I think it's time.
Right, it's time for Victoria. Victoria's dumping wine.
Well,
so.
It's
all right. She'll drink what we've poured in the spatoon later.
Yeah.
That's fine. Right.
Oh, sorry.
Over to you.
I was doing
okay.
That's for you.
So,
Philip. You first.
So I have very much stuck with the kind of the Californian icons, as you can see.
It's good.
We actually, Matthew and I opened Meerlust and Ridge at the same time a couple of hours ago, so it has had a little bit of time to breathe. So Ridge, wow, I mean, just incredible. I think again, because these guys are old hands at the Wine Society, and I'm sort of if only a few months in, I think I really recognize what we have and the relationships we have with suppliers. So the relationship with Ridge and with Paul Draper, who joined Ridge. I mean, he's officially retired, I think, in 21, but he joined Ridge in 69.
Wow.
He loves the Wine Society, so much so that Sarah Knowles managed to persuade him to make obviously one of our anniversary wines, as Zinfandel from Gizerville. So one of the things I've learned in the time that I've been here is just how strong the relationships are that we have with our producers. So Ridge's history is not quite as old as Meerlust. It doesn't date back to the 1600s, but it does date back to the late 1880s, when an Italian doctor bought a bunch of land, wanted to plant vineyards on the Montebello Ridge, which is an incredible site with quite a proportion of limestone, which is not to be taken for granted in California. But its modern history really dates back to the 1960s, when, so kind of post-prohibition, when 4 Stanford scientists rebonded the winery. And then, as I mentioned, Paul Draper, who has been the winemaker there for so many years, joined in 69. Zinfandel has been a part of their story since very early on in that kind of modern era. So their first vintage of Zin, I think, was 64. This vineyard, so the Pagani Ranch vineyard, so actually, to skip back, one of the things that we opened with was that 3 of the wines we have today are single vineyards and 3 are blends. And actually Ridge's philosophy, or how they've kind of built their definition of fine wine is very much on single vineyards. So they are staunch believers of the fact that a single vineyard wine is the best, kind of is the apogee of an expression, which obviously we can discuss and debate and argue with, but it's again similar to with Jim Clendenin. It's about having a vision and then sticking to that vision. So Pagani Ranch is a single vineyard in the Sonoma Valley, and it is owned, it's farmed, by a 4th generation family, the Pagani family, who've owned it since the 80s. It is a rare thing in California in that it's one of only a handful of vineyards that is predominantly, thank you there, yeah. So you can see, well, Pagani Ranch in the Sonoma Valley. It is a cooler site than both than Geyserville and Lytton Springs, so other famous Zinfandels from Ridge, obviously. But these guys have farmed the vineyard for 4 generations. It's around, it's less than 20 hectares, 15 to 20 hectares, predominantly Zinfandel, some Petit Syrah, a little tiny bit of Mourvedre, and a little tiny bit of Alicante Boucher is the field blend. And Ridge have been working with them since 1991. So they've bottled every single vintage since 91. It is, it's kind of a little bit a nod to Freddy and his Australian wines. There's a quite a strong message here around exclusivity to the Wine Society in the UK. So Ridge have traditionally been quite dependent on the on-trade, so on restaurant and restaurant sales. And so during the pandemic, when that was not happening and they were struggling, that's when Sarah stepped in and actually bought a really big parcel of Pagani Ranch. And then we have continued to work with this. So this is not the current vintage. We also have the 21 available and the 22 coming very soon, but this is the 2019 vintage. We wanted to show something that had a little bit more age on it. So, I mean, it's still a baby, but it's at least got 5 years in the bottle. It is a field blend, so it's 90% Zin, a little bit of Petit Syrah, a little bit of Alicante Boucher. It's aged in American oak. It's sort of, I mean, what I love.
It smells so nice.
It smells delicious.
Oh.
It is actually pretty exuberant,
Yeah.
but it needed that double decant. So I don't know how you guys are doing at home, but a couple of 2.5 hours ago, we decanted it twice, and it just needed that to kind of open up the fragrance. But it's sort of proper classic Zinfandel aromas.
But it's one of those wines where I stuck my nose in the glass and I couldn't help but smile. It's just so
blood oranges and licorice.
Oranges and licorice.
I love that, and blueberry compote, and it's sort of spicy, sweet, ripe fruit. But so a key thing actually to mention about Ridge before I forget what I need to mention and we finish is that the way that along with their kind of single vineyard philosophy, the way that they define, or the way that they talk about their winemaking is as pre-industrial, and that's basically, it's a minimal interventional approach in the winery. It's about focusing on the vineyards, which I think all of the wines that we've been looking at today share that. They have that at their soul. But Ridge were one of the first back in, and you're not gonna be able to see this, those of you who don't have a bottle, but back with the
Why don't you read it to them?
We'll read it. So back with the 2011 vintage, they started to declare their ingredients on the bottle. And actually, this is just such a great precursor to, well, I guess, complete transparency for drinkers.
2048. Oh no, you what? Come on.
That's the Rubicon, I think.
I'm sorry, the Rubicon 2048. Sorry, we're just getting distracted by the chat.
We've just drunk it now, so don't worry, you can.
Also in 10 years is fine. But yeah, so they state their ingredients on the label. So in the case of Pagani Ranch, it is hand-harvested grapes, indigenous yeast, naturally occurring malolactic bacteria. So in essence, no additions. Oak from barrel aging, because it's aged in American oak. I think about 15% is new oak, and then SO2, so sulfites, which they add at bottling, and that is it.
I think that's one of the great things about Ridge. Not only do they include their labelling ingredients, of which some of them do include water as well, which they're totally transparent about, but also they are absolute 100% American oak backers.
Yeah.
And they're probably one of the few estates that really does back American oak and do it really bloody well.
And really well. And Zinfandel just lends it feels like it marries with American oak so well. That sweetness of fruit works with the kind of the more toasted coconut and those kind of aromas.
I really like it.
So do
and I think
I look forward to drinking it later.
I did have some pictures from Sarah's last visit. So Sarah was last out in California. I think it was last November. So just to share, so Paul Draper
Look at that view.
on the left, incredible.
Yeah.
On the left with sorry to say they are at Montebello here. Sorry, they're not at Pagani Ranch. With John Olney, who is now the head winemaker and COO, but John has been working alongside Paul for many years, and John actually is the real kind of Zinfandel nut. He absolutely adores Old Vine Zinfandel, so he's very much carrying on Paul's great work. And I think there's maybe a couple of other bits.
Speaking of Old Vine.
There we go.
Whoa.
There's a gorgeous 100+ year old vine from Pagani Ranch that vineyard is from. Thanks, Daniel.
That is a gnarly.
That is a gnarly vine, but that's a vine that's seen more things than we have, and there's like through a century or more. So a proper kind of, again, a new Californian classic to tie up.
Modern classics.
I think the amazing thing, I think Zinfandel often has the ability to, gathers sugar pretty quick, and it's 14.5% alcohol, which isn't that high for Zinfandel.
No,
it carries it super well.
And I think there's still a kind of, there's a vibrancy and a freshness. It's not high acidity, but there is a really refreshing. There's a crunch still to the fruit. This is not overcooked fruit. It's really beautifully, perfectly harvested fruit.
Well. I just like
optimum ripeness.
I just like to point out my two wines were the cheapest of everyone's. Anyway, so to the vote.
Well, actually, you say that, but there was a question about the price of the Whistler. Obviously, as you mentioned,
sorry, yes. So as I said before, the estate wines we sell as a first release once a year. Will be next available in January. However, including duty and VAT, so full price, it's £26 a bottle, I believe. And that's for Penfolds Grange clones, people. Which is a bargain.
It's true. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I agree. I'll buy it.
Thank you.
I'm buying it.
I'll say two of my instant takeaways here. Firstly, Freddie, brilliant bottle positioning throughout this session.
Thank you.
What do you mean? Just Australia?
No.
Mainly.
Yeah.
Also, that was probably the most amicable battle I think I've ever.
Oh, I know.
I
feel like they're slightly towering over me.
No, look, I feel like we talked a big talk. We talked a big talk, and especially the karate picture that people might have seen. I expected Victoria to absolutely just punch our skulls in based on that stance, but no, I think actually it turns out that we all get on quite well.
Was it this picture you're referring to?
There we go. That's the one.
This one. Yeah.
I just think your energy in that is.
But we also picked 6 incredible wines. Which we all
you do.
Well done, team.
We'd all be delighted to drink, and are going to be delighted.
We're going to drink them with a nice steak pie after this.
Freddie's cooking.
That was me pre-tan.
So. Before we discuss the meal you're about to have, I can see a number of comments made here about some of the favourite wines we've seen. The Ridge Zinfandel is a winner for us. Going through wine 1, best value, but my son loves wine 3. Members, I'm just going to see if I can launch this poll. As I said, just the 2 questions. What's your favourite white and what's your favourite red? Let me see if this is launching correctly. Can we see that?
We vote.
No.
I think we should give our answers individually
after the polls come in. Okay. I'm going to.
Oh, you should. Can you vote? No, don't.
Well, it came up, but we've clicked off of it. We haven't voted.
We will give our opinions at the end. Personally, my favourites aren't necessarily my wines.
Oh.
There you go.
Mine
are. I find it really difficult to pick favourites.
No, they were 6 incredibly high quality wines there. It's very difficult to choose. I'm glad I'm not picking.
And so true to their
I'll
places
put it that
as
way.
well.
Yeah,
I think all 6 of them really spoke of where they came from.
Yeah,
and also with the reds as well, I've noticed a few comments in terms, and obviously you've mentioned as well about opening these bottles an hour or 2 before, let them breathe.
Yeah.
If you've got more in your glass, if you've got the bottles there, these will continue to get better as they sort of air and breathe over the course of the rest of the evening and even into tomorrow if there's still some left.
Absolutely.
They will be terrific wines over the next few hours. Yeah, very much.
Okay,
Right.
So we're in your hands.
You're in my hands. Shall I end the poll
We
now?
need
Has everyone
the
voted?
we need the countdown sort of
We need to line up
theme.
next
Gil in Cambridge.
Oh, you
You you guys
Leave your
can
scores.
provide some sort of soundtrack as I declare the end of the poll. Right, I'm going to share the results just so that everyone can see them here.
Right.
Can you see those results?
Oh, you.
Okay. Oh yes, yes, baby.
Well, no dinner for you.
Okay.
USA. I think Sarah's voted 17 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, this doesn't break down who's voted. There's just all anonymous voting. But well, it's a nice even spread.
I'm surprised, but I'm okay. Gil, maybe you would like to give your, considering you've had the wines as well, I believe.
Yeah, let's hear your input, Gil.
Well, I've been attempting to avoid this, and I thought I said that I wasn't having to do it. But based on tonight alone, I think I might be going with the Rustenburg White.
Yeah.
And I've got to say the Whistler Shiraz. Yeah.
Outrageous.
However, USA's won both.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
You don't need his backing. Go on, Matthew.
My
Gil,
vote wouldn't have made a difference there, but
I totally agree. They're my picks as well. I think the Rustenburg is my favorite white. I think the Whistler is what I want to drink right now. The Mearless is what I want in my cellar, and the Ridge is what I want someone to gift to me, please.
Yes.
Nice.
Great
nice.
summary.
That's
Great
good.
summary.
that's very good. Wow.
I'm gonna put my hat in the ring here and just say that Rustenburg Five Soldiers is a very special place in my heart because I did harvest there. I was like,
Sorry, I didn't mention that.
I told Matthew earlier, I did harvest in 2017, which, by the way, if you have any Five Soldiers 17, like keep on keeping it because it was.
Don't drink it.
Get rid of
Victoria
it.
made it. Yeah.
Because I made it, I literally filled the barrels. I think it's an incredible wine, and I think for a single vineyard expression, it really does punch a sum. It needs time. We shouldn't be approaching that 22. It's a 22 vintage. We shouldn't be approaching it at 2 years old, but really beautiful wine. And I enjoyed all the reds for their great different that diversity. They're so different, each one of them. I agree that the Rubicon needs the Rubicon is the one for cellaring, but I'm going to really enjoy drinking them all.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah,
I agree.
and I think it's fair to say. I think again, I loved how all of the wines really spoke of their place. I want to buy some Mearless and keep it. I think similar to what you say, Matthew. I want someone to bring some of the Ridge around to my house, which they have done. Fantastic! What a night! Great. And I'm gonna next time there's the first release of the Whistler, I'm gonna buy myself a case as I did with this one. I love the Au Bon Climat. I just thought that was super, really lovely. But Matthew, don't worry, because I really liked your wine too.
Well, I loved your LS as well. I think it's great value.
I think. Well, do you know? I think all of the wines, red and white, are just they're all so representative of wines that speak of their place, that are pushing the boundaries, that are at the forefront of modern fine wine. So I think it's. I personally really enjoyed all of them. Actually,
agreed.
Gil, were there any more questions we need to answer before the end of play?
We get 2 minutes to go. Look at that. Perfect.
I don't think there were. I may well have missed one, and apologies about
that. Are there any that particularly speak favourably of my wines? That you might like?
I've stated all of those. I've already said those ones. Yeah.
Okay.
I would just like to raise a toast to Sarah Knowles, who's on maternity leave at the moment, and who sent us a picture. So in our bio WhatsApp group. No, she wines for a start. I'm absolutely talking about her wines, but she sent us a picture of her little baby girl in a pumpkin outfit.
Oh, so cute!
And said, "Me and the pumpkin are voting for the US." Hence why I think, and I didn't even put a picture of the pumpkin in.
She used to buy Australia, and she's sold out.
The US still won.
Well, and also cheers to all of the members who joined us this evening. It's been really good fun. We've really enjoyed ourselves, and we hope that you have too. And thank you, Gil, for hosting us and keeping us all on track, just about.
Well, yes, it was a tough job, but thoroughly fun on my end here. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
And don't forget to buy lots of Ellis Merchants and Whistler. Cheers. Bye.